Hello, welcome to this tutorial video for CollectionsIndex Web Edition. Today we're going to look at terminologies. Terminologies are one of the ways we control vocabularies in the system. The other way is by authorities, but we'll cover those in another video. Now, certain fields in your system are controlled by a terminology. So in those cases, you'll see a drop-down list of terms or a series of checkboxes, and to fill these fields, you can only select from the choices available, so they completely control what can and can't be entered into certain fields. To access your terminologies, go to the Authorities section of your menu, open it up, and you'll see a Terminologies link there at the bottom of the list. And if we click this, we can now view and manage our terminologies. Now, each terminology listed here will control one or more fields in your system. Some will be used in collections records, but equally some might control fields in asset records, activity records, authority records, or even multiple types of records, wherever vocabulary needs to be controlled. Now let's select one of these terminologies as an example. Note we can simply scroll through this whole list, but as you can see, there are quite a lot of terminologies there. So if you do know the name of the terminology you want to edit, you can start typing it in and it will filter the list for you. And yes, let's select condition. Once we're looking at a term list, we can see everything in the term list here, all the terms. And if we left click one of these terms, we will open up an editing form. We can see what information's already been recorded about the term, and we can edit the form further if we need to. Now these records really are quite short normally. They're often quite self-explanatory. However, in some cases there might be additional fields that might be useful depending on the type of term. In this case, it's really quite self-explanatory that the term is good in relation to condition. So there's not a lot more we need to record for this term. I should also note at this stage that to be able to access and edit and change terms in the way we'll be looking at in this video, you will need a certain level of user permissions. So if you can't access these features and you think you need to, you'll need to talk to whoever manages your system. If we right click on a term, you can see we have some options. We can add new terms, and we'll explore that shortly. And we can also delete terms. So let's see if we can delete the term really good. We'll get a message saying, are we sure we want to delete this term? And if we say yes, that's now deleted the term from our list. Let's now try again. Let's try and delete the term good. Now, in this case, the term good is being used by records in our system, and we're not allowed to change or delete terms which are already in use. So in this case, if we really wanted to delete this term, we need to edit our records so that this term was no longer being used. There's a couple more things to note when we're looking at a term record. Up at the top here are two buttons. There's a save button, so if we have added anything to the fields here, we can save what we've done. And there's also a usage button, and this is really helpful if we want to know how this term is being used in our system. So if I click on usage, this will tell us what type of records are using this term and how many there are. So in this example, we can see there's 4 object records using the term good to control condition. So if I click on this link, it will take me to a search summary showing me those 4 objects. So that can be quite a useful way of jumping between terms and items in your collection. But let's return to editing our terms. To add a new term, ordinarily you want to right click on the parent name up here. So in this case, condition, you're going to click add. And let's add a new term. Let's add excellent. And it's as simple as that. And we now have the term excellent on our term list. Note that we could add further information about this if we wanted to, but I think that's self-explanatory and we'll leave it where it is. Let's now look at a different type of terminology just to learn a few more things about what terminologies can do for us. And we're going to pick the location terminology. So once again, I could scroll down. They are in alphabetical order to help you find them. or I could have typed location up here to filter the results. And we're now looking at the location terminology. At first glance, this terminology looks quite similar to what we've already seen. We have a list of terms down here on the left, and if we click on a term, we can view it, and we can view its editing form. But there is a difference. This terminology is set up to be a hierarchy, and you can see that some terms in this list can be opened up, and we can see child terms inside them, and we can open those up, and so on and so forth, and really create a complex terminology structure that's as hierarchical and as layered as we need it to be. Adding to this hierarchy is simple. We simply find the parent term and we right click. So let's say we've got rack A, we've got rack B, we want to add rack C to storeroom number 1. I'm going to right click on store 1, I'm going to click on add, I'm going to put rack C, and there we have it. We've now added a new rack to our storeroom. It's as simple as that. I'm now going to show you a use of a particular type of field which is very useful, particularly in hierarchical term lists. Let's go to rack A, bay A here, this child term for bay A. Now, all terms in a terminology have to be unique, but it's easy to see how in a branching terminology like this, we could have many bay A's situated in different racks and storerooms. So if we already have one bay A like this, and we try to create another one somewhere else, the system won't let us create a term with a duplicate name. And that's where this field, Discriminator, comes in really helpful. We can add information into the Discriminator field to say what's special about this bay A term to make it different from any other term that might be called bay A. In this case, we've got an abbreviated version of store 1 rack A. And so you can use the Discriminator field if you need terms in your list that may on the surface appear like they have the same name. So a quick note there about the all-important Discriminator field. And if I just jump over to bay B, you can see this one hasn't got a discriminator, but if we wanted to make another bay B, we'd have to put something in there in order to do that. Now let's explore a third term list. Let's explore place. So we're now looking at the place terminology. Note we have this the world term broken into continents within and so on and so forth. So as you can imagine, this terminology, when fully fleshed out, could contain hundreds, if not thousands, of different terms and could be very complex to navigate and find the term you want. However, you can search your term lists. There's a search box up here. So if I want to find London, I can type that in. I can press find term, and I will jump to the first instance of London in the list. But note, it's also given me a total number of results. And if I keep clicking on find term, I'll jump from result to result until I find the London I'm interested in. So note that I can just keep clicking here and I will go through all results that are within a London result or are a London result in their own right. Like so, and just keep working my way through those locations. So that's the place terminology. Also note I talked about some different types of terms having different fields. Note that something like the place terminology, the edit form here, we can put things in like coordinates. So the fields you see in this form will vary depending on the type of term that you're editing. So we've had a good look behind the scenes there of how to access and edit terminologies, but let's now jump over to an object record and remind ourselves how these terminologies display when we are editing our records. So I am now editing an object record, and let's remind ourselves how these different types of terminologies are going to appear when we are editing fields on an object record, for example. So let's find the condition field that we looked at earlier. Open up condition and technical assessment, and we can see the condition fields here, and we can see how condition appears as that flat term list. So we can see that here. And note that that new term excellent is appearing in this list. So we can click anything from this list to change the term associated with this object's condition. Let's look at location. This is the field that it controls here. And note that we can expand these terms to get at the child terms, for example, and we can click those and select them. One interesting thing to note is where terminologies are configured as a hierarchy like this, it is possible, if you have the right permissions, to add new terms on the fly. So for example, if I go back to this term list, I could right click here, I could add a RACD, and that will appear in my term list. So some of these can be edited from the object editing form or another type of editing form if you have the right permissions. So let's select that. Now let's have a look at how that place terminology is appearing to us. Place controls quite a few different geographically associated fields within the system. So if I go to something like production, we can see we have production place. This is controlled by the place terminology, and you can see it's currently showing Manchester, but we can scroll around and change that if we need to. Now let's have a look at one more type of terminology. It's not one we looked at earlier, but it is interesting to note. If I open up description, we can see the color fields here. This is also simply a flat list terminology containing a list of colors, but you can see in this case the terminology is rendered with these tick boxes. That simply means that we're allowed to pick multiple terms, and so we can simply tick all the colors that apply. But if we wanted to edit what these checkboxes were, we simply edit the color terminology in the usual way. I'm now editing an archive record just to show how terminologies affect other types of collection records too. We can see the obvious ones in the archive record are things like repository, level of description, which is again simply controlled by these flat term lists. And so some term lists, some terminologies are unique to certain types of records, whereas others, like place, and again if I scroll down in this instance to access points, we can see one of the fields in here is place name, and this opens a familiar world term list, like so. But in this case, we can pick multiple terms if we want via these checkboxes. The final thing I want to mention on this video is the way terms appear as links when we're looking at other types of records. So in this case, we have a few different links relating to different terms. And if I scroll down, we can see something like material. The term here is porcelain. And if we click on this link, we will be taken to the term record for porcelain. Now, when we're looking at a term record in this way, note we can click on edit to edit this record. And again, if it's possible to delete, we can also try and delete it. And there's a few other options down the side here too. So clicking locate will open up this term within the terminology pages we were looking at previously. So you can see this term and all others in the list, make changes, that sort of thing. If I were to click retrieve this branch, it will show a search result showing this term and any other child terms that might belong to it. And that's particularly useful, of course, if you're looking at a hierarchical terminology. And then we have this idea of usage again, where we get a summary of how many records in the system are using this term, and we can click on these results to get a search summary showing those records, in this case 5 object records. So that's it for today's video. Remember, getting familiar with the terminologies in your system and customizing them to your needs is a really key part of running your system in the most efficient and effective way. There are some other terminology tips, such as ways to tidy and merge terms, but we'll save that for another special episode. So for now, goodbye, thank you for watching, and remember, if you subscribe to the channel, you'll get notified whenever new videos are added.